I'm Natalie Prescott, 35 years old, successful. By every measure, just not in the eyes of my status-chasing family. For over a decade, they've treated my hospitality career like I'm just running glorified housekeeping. But this year's family getaway changed everything. Every summer, the Prescotts hold a grand reunion, and this time, we gathered at Ridgeview Pines Resort, a 5-star retreat tucked into the Colorado Rockies. The twist: I bought the resort last spring, quietly through a holding company they'd never think to Google. So when my cousin Brianna handed out room assignments and stuck me with the renovated supply closet, complete with a flickering lamp and a suspicious smell, I didn't say a word. Not then, at least. I simply smiled, knowing the presidential villa key card rested comfortably in my purse. If you've ever been underestimated by your own relatives, keep watching. And if you're enjoying this from a cozy spot, somewhere beautiful, drop a comment and tell me where. Have your family ever written you off? I'd love to hear your story too. Growing up a Prescott meant knowing your rank, and my parents and I were squarely on the lower rungs. My father Raymond taught middle school math, and my mom Elaine worked nights as an ER nurse. We had love, warmth, and homemade meals. But love didn't buy luxury, at least not in the eyes of Aunt Vivian and Uncle Charles, who defined success by the number of zeros on your tax return. Vivian, my father's older sister, married into wealth. Charles owned a string of tire shops across 3 states and made sure no one forgot. Their home, a cold glass mansion outside Scottsdale, hosted many of our gatherings. Our beat-up Camry looked absurd next to their fleet of German cars. And while my parents brought fresh-baked pies, the rest of the family catered from gourmet bistros. Their kids, Brianna and Lucas, were raised with the same quiet superiority. Brianna always dressed in the latest trends, used to hand me her designer cast-offs with performative kindness, making sure everyone saw how generous she was. Lucas wasn't mean, just absent, rarely spoke to me beyond nodding across the buffet table. Important conversations, I was never included. "You don't mind the kids' table, do you?" "Natalie?" They'd say well into my mid-20s. It became a running joke, a quiet reminder of where they thought I belonged. They expected I'd follow my parents' humble path, work hard live, quietly fade into the background. But I had bigger plans. I juggled waitressing, hotel reception, and janitorial shifts to pay my way through school. Graduated with a hospitality management degree they dismissed entirely. Hospitality. "Isn't that just hotel work?" Aunt Vivian sneered once. "Maybe you can become a travel agent or something." She'd sip her wine and move on content. I was going nowhere fast. What they didn't know was that I was building something quietly, something they'd walk into without even knowing it. After graduation, I started at the absolute bottom of the hospitality ladder, front desk clerk, at a modest roadside inn just outside Fort Collins. The fluorescent lights buzzed, the carpeting hadn't been replaced in a decade, and my hourly wage barely covered groceries. But I paid attention. Every check-in, every maintenance call, every complaint, I treated them like case studies. I was determined to learn the business from the ground up. It was there that I met Eleanor Marsh, a regional vice president for a major hotel group. She stopped by during an unexpected storm, stranded by a flight delay. I helped untangle a complicated reservation issue for a VIP guest she was escorting. Instead of thanking me and walking away, she asked for my name. "You've got instincts most managers don't," she said. "This industry isn't about beds, it's about belonging." Eleanor became my mentor, the first person to believe in me without caveats or condescension. Under her wing, I rose through the ranks, first as assistant manager at a mid-tier hotel, then manager at a boutique lodge in Jackson Hole. When Eleanor launched her own boutique hotel venture, she asked me to join her founding team. That leap changed everything. A year in, we came across a faded Victorian inn for sale just outside Taos, New Mexico. Cracked walls, sagging porches, outdated plumbing. But I saw something. Eleanor was honest. "This could bury you if it goes wrong." Still, I drained my savings, maxed my credit, and took out a small business loan. Eleanor signed on as a minority investor. I threw myself into the renovation like my life depended on it, because it did. 18 months later, the Painted Sycamore opened to glowing reviews. Guests raved about the intimate vibe, the locally sourced menus, the feeling that every detail mattered. Within 3 years, it was fully booked year-round and featured in several travel magazines. One success led to another. I began building a quiet reputation for reviving overlooked properties and giving them a soul. Each hotel I restored told a story charm without pretense, luxury with heart. That's how Prescott Hospitality Group was born. A curated collection of unique high-end destinations with character. The highlight came last year, when I acquired Ridgeview Pines Resort, the crown jewel nestled in the Colorado Rockies, a family-owned gem teetering under financial strain. I kept my name off the press releases. The acquisition was big news in the hospitality world, but not flashy enough for the social columns my family reads. That was fine by me. Despite my success, I never fully let my family into that part of my life. I didn't lie. I just let them believe what they wanted. Still working in hotels, they'd ask, as if I were managing room service or folding towels. I'd smile and nod. Maybe it was pride. Maybe I just wanted to succeed on my terms without seeking their approval. Whatever the reason, while my wealth quietly climbed, their opinion of me stayed frozen in time. And so the Prescott family reunion, that annual theater of pride, was about to meet a very different version of Natalie. For as long as I could remember, the Prescott family reunion had rotated between relatives' sprawling homes or ritzy vacation rentals. Most often it landed at Aunt Vivian and Uncle Charles's place in Scottsdale, a massive, echoey estate with too many rooms and not enough warmth. Strangely, our house in Loveland, though perfectly comfortable, was never considered. The excuses varied: too far from the airport, not enough guest bathrooms, but we all knew what it really was. We simply didn't measure up. As the family expanded with marriages, toddlers, and a new round of luxury SUV leases, we outgrew even Vivian's estate. So the gatherings moved to neutral ground hotels and resorts. It seemed more practical, at least on the surface. But with that shift came a new game room hierarchy. At these destinations, Vivian's branch of the family always snagged the premium suites. Meanwhile, the rest of us were assigned rooms like puzzle pieces based on an unspoken pecking order. Last year's beachside reunion in La Jolla was particularly mortifying. I was squeezed into a cramped double bed with second cousin Meredith's teenage daughters. Meanwhile, Brianna had an oceanfront suite with a private balcony and catered charcuterie. I'd requested a room to myself, offering to cover the extra cost, but Vivian made a production of checking the budget, only to tell me with faux sympathy that it just wasn't feasible. "But you'll love sharing with the girls," Natalie, she'd chirped. "It'll be cozy." So when this year's reunion message popped up in our group chat announcing Ridgeview Pines Resort as the venue, I nearly laughed out loud. Of course, no one in my family had a clue that I now owned the entire resort. The irony was delicious. I had poured heart money and months of sleepless nights into restoring this place to the pinnacle of luxury, and now my relatives would be walking into it completely unaware. For a second, I considered announcing it in the group thread. Just a simple, "Can't wait to host you all at my resort," but then I stopped myself. A lifetime of being dismissed and underestimated had taught me something valuable. People reveal their true nature when they think you have nothing to offer. So I waited. The planning, as always, was led by Aunt Vivian. Her group message landed in early April, brimming with that signature mix of faux warmth and controlling energy. Family Charles and I are absolutely thrilled to announce this year's reunion will be held at the stunning Ridgeview Pines Resort in Colorado. We've secured an excellent group rate for the last weekend of July. Brianna will be coordinating room assignments as usual. Please confirm attendance by the 15th. Cost will be split evenly, approximately $350 per adult for weekend accommodations. I read it twice, suppressing a grin. No mention, of course, that room types varied wildly from basic $250 garden doubles to $1 $200 luxury villas with private hot tubs and panoramic mountain views. And Brianna was already in charge of assigning who got what. Oh, this was going to be fun. The message that followed Aunt Vivian's group announcement was no surprise. My phone buzzed almost immediately with a private text from Brianna. "Hey Natalie, just checking. Are you planning to join us this year? Mom asked me to confirm since budgets are probably tight in your industry right now. We can work something out if you need help with your portion." That familiar mix of performative kindness and condescension sent a sharp pulse of annoyance through me. Brianna had no idea what my finances looked like, yet she assumed I'd be the one struggling to pay. She always had. For someone who lived in a house she didn't pay for with furniture she didn't pick out, she sure loved to play the benevolent cousin. For a moment, I was tempted to respond with a screenshot of Prescott Hospitality Group's most recent quarterly earnings, complete with the Ridgeview Pines acquisition figures. Instead, I took a breath and kept my tone neutral. Thanks for checking, Brianna. I'll definitely be there and can cover my share without any problem. Her reply came quickly. Great adding you to the list now. We're doing our best to match room preferences this year. I actually laughed. In 15 years of family reunions, no one had ever asked for my preferences. I always got the leftover accommodations, usually after Vivian's family claimed the premium suites. Room preferences, huh? This would be a first. The weeks leading up to the reunion were a flurry of quiet preparation. While my staff typically prepared for high-profile guest stays with discretion and precision, this was different. They didn't know they'd be hosting my family, who thought I was just another attendee. I held a private meeting with my management team in the Lakeside conference room. Gregory, my general manager, sat across from me, clipboard in hand. He'd been with me since the day I signed the acquisition contract and knew exactly how much this property meant to me. I know this is unusual, I began, but I'd like to be treated like any regular guest while my family's here, at least for the first few days. Gregory raised an eyebrow. Of course, Miss Prescott. May I ask why I smiled? Let's call it an undercover boss experiment. I want to see how they behave, how they treat me, without knowing I own this place. He nodded slowly. That actually makes a lot of sense. We mapped out the plan in detail. Staff would be informed to treat me as they would any other guest. My private suite would be prepped, but unlisted from the family's reservation block. A concealed elevator and side entrance would allow me to slip in and out discreetly. And what kind of room do you expect they'll assign you? Gregory asked with a smirk. If history's any guide? I said the smallest one you've got with a broken lamp and no view. Gregory grinned. We don't really have bad rooms here, Natalie. I leaned back in my chair. Oh, don't worry. Brianna will find one. Behind the scenes, I made one more key arrangement: discreet staff monitoring. Not surveillance exactly. I didn't want my relatives' private conversations recorded. But I did want my employees to feel protected, especially from any patronizing or rude behavior. The staff at Ridgeview Pines was exceptional, each one handpicked for their professionalism, kindness, and commitment to service. I wouldn't tolerate anyone, even family, treating them with anything less than dignity. As July drew closer, our family group chat exploded with the usual buzz. Status updates flew like confetti. Apparently, Uncle Charles had just secured a lucrative dealership expansion and was eager to mention it at every opportunity. Lucas, my other cousin, had just made partner at his Denver law firm, and Brianna's husband Nathan had purchased a brand new luxury SUV perfect for mountain roads, she noted in a photo caption showcasing the gleaming black vehicle in their driveway. Of course, these humble brags came wrapped in concern for me. During one lively thread, Uncle Charles asked, "Anyone know if Natalie's still working at that hotel chain?" Before I could reply, Brianna jumped in with her usual helpful tone. "I think she's a manager now. The hospitality industry's been hit hard, though, so I told her we can help with her share of the cost if needed." Aunt Vivian responded seconds later. "So thoughtful of you, darling." I stared at the screen for a moment, fingers twitching with the urge to send a screenshot of Ridgeview's occupancy numbers for the quarter, or maybe just a photo of me holding the title deed. But I took a breath and typed, "No financial help needed, but thanks for the concern." Looking forward to seeing everyone at Ridgeview Pines. Later, a separate thread popped up discussing attire. Aunt Vivian posted, "Reminder, Ridgeview Pines has a dinner dress code. Business casual minimum, preferably formal for Saturday night." Rebecca Lucas's wife chimed in, "I'm bringing 3 cocktail dresses just to be safe." Then came Brianna again. "Natalie, let me know if you need to borrow anything. I have plenty." The implication was as clear as ever that I wouldn't own anything appropriate for dinner at a place like Ridgeview. Ironically, the dress code was my idea, though it was far more relaxed than they assumed. I replied with a short, calm message. Thanks, all set with attire. A few days later, I received a final message from Brianna confirming room logistics, but again, no mention of what room I'd be staying in. Just instructions to check in with the group, not the front desk. The stage was set. In just days, my family would walk through the doors of my resort and not a single one of them knew it. A strange mix of excitement and nerves hummed in me. Was I being petty, or was this the closure I never knew I needed? The road to Ridgeview, pines curved through the forest, sunlight glinting off the lake between trees. As cars rounded the final bend, the Grand Lodge rose into view, stone timber and glass bathed in golden light, imposing yet warm. I arrived early that morning just as planned. I checked in discreetly through the staff entrance where Gregory met me with the final logistics report in hand. After a brief rundown of the arrival schedule, I made my way to the main lodge, coffee in hand, and settled into a deep leather armchair near the stone fireplace. A towering vase of fresh wildflowers from the surrounding forest shielded me just enough to stay unnoticed, the perfect vantage point. From there, I had a clear view of the entryway and reception desk, ready to watch the grand arrival unfold. Aunt Vivian and Uncle Charles were first pulling up in a brand new silver Mercedes S-Class, the glossy hood gleaming in the sun. The valet, perfectly trained, greeted them with warm professionalism, efficient, respectful, but no special treatment. Charles, just look at this place. Aunt Vivian gasped, her voice rising like she was announcing royalty. A few other guests turned their heads. It's even more gorgeous than the website photos. Uncle Charles stepped into the lobby like a man inspecting a future acquisition. Not bad at all. Reminds me of that lodge in Aspen last winter, although that had a bit more authentic character. I nearly choked on my coffee. The authentic character he was referencing, that was my doing. Every beam and window pane in Ridgeview Pines had been painstakingly sourced from reclaimed materials. We preserved what we could from the 19th century hunting lodge that once stood here, blending old-world charm with modern comforts. It was a renovation that took nearly 10 months of approvals and twice the budget, but apparently it still didn't beat Aspen in his book. Within the next hour, the rest of the Prescotts arrived in style. Lucas and Rebecca rolled up in their pristine BMW X5, followed closely by Brianna and Nathan in their freshly detailed Range Rover. One by one, relatives stepped into the grand lobby with practiced expressions, some wide-eyed others feigning cool detachment. Then came my parents. Their well-loved Honda Accord looked modest, parked beside the SUVs, but they stepped out with warm smiles. They paused in the doorway, clearly impressed, but slightly overwhelmed by the grandeur of the lodge. I could see the awe in my father's eyes as he glanced around at the towering wood beams and the expansive glass wall overlooking the lake. Other cousins and aunts trickled in, reacting to the setting with their own blend of admiration and quiet judgment. I waited until the majority had gathered before rising from my seat, pulling my weekend bag behind me, casually just another guest arriving on time. Natalie, my mother, called hurrying over with open arms. She embraced me warmly. We were starting to wonder if you got stuck in traffic. Not bad on the mountain road, I replied, hugging her back and offering greetings to my father and a few others nearby. Aunt Vivian floated past with a quick air kiss. Darling, glad you could join us. Brianna's coordinating check-in. We're just waiting on the Millers, and then we'll sort out the rooms. I smiled. Still no seat offered. Of course. Just the way they liked it. All right, everyone welcome to Ridgeview Pines Resort, Brianna announced, clapping her hands with a bright, polished smile. I've coordinated with the management to secure our rooms and will now be handing out keys. We've reserved a block of suites in both the main lodge and the lakeside annex. She sounded like a cheerful tour guide or a morning show host announcing vacation giveaways. One by one, she began calling names, passing out sleek envelopes with key cards tucked inside each one, presented like a prize on a game show. Uncle Charles and Aunt Vivian, you'll be in the Lakeview Executive Suite on the top floor, she announced, proudly handing them their envelope. It comes with a private balcony and a separate sitting room. Lucas and Rebecca, you're just down the hall in the Mountain View Junior Suite, also top floor, she added, handing off the next envelope with a wink. Raymond and Elaine, you're in the deluxe corner king fourth floor wraparound windows. You'll love the sunrise. One by one, the key cards were distributed, each room a bit less impressive than the last. There was a rhythm to it, a slow, calculated descent down the invisible ladder of Prescott family importance. My parents had been given a perfectly decent room, not luxury, but not shameful either. Respectable, acceptable. And then Brianna turned to me. Her smile tightened ever so slightly. Natalie, we've placed you in the cedar room in the original wing. She held out a plain envelope with one key card, no welcome brochure, no glossy folder, with spa details or dining options. It's cozy, she added quickly, and has character. I accepted the envelope with a calm nod, thanking her as if I didn't already know what that room was. But I did. The cedar room was in the old wing, a section we'd begun renovating in phases, and had already pulled from the main reservation system. It was one of the few remaining guest rooms not up to our modern standards. In fact, it was barely guest-ready at all. We'd used the space for temporary storage until the next round of construction. The ceiling had a known leak from the last spring storm, and though we'd patched it as a stopgap, it was scheduled for full repair next month. The carpet was worn, the lighting outdated, and the HVAC unit whined like a jet engine on cold mornings. How did you even manage to book that room? I asked lightly, not accusing, genuinely curious. Brianna waved a manicured hand. Oh, I spoke directly to the reservations manager. Told him we needed every space we could get for the family. Once I mentioned Uncle Charles and his company, he was very accommodating. I made a mental note to follow up with the front desk and clarify the chain of command and remind the team that family name dropping doesn't override internal protocol. But for now, I kept my tone pleasant. Thanks for putting all of this together. It must have taken a lot of effort. As everyone dispersed to settle in, I headed toward the old wing with my bag in tow, already imagining the musty smell and water-stained ceiling I was about to endure in my own resort. The cedar room sat at the very end of a dim, narrow hallway, the farthest possible point from the elevator, spa, or any meaningful resort amenity. I swiped my keycard, already bracing myself for what I knew I'd find. The door creaked open, and sure enough, the space beyond was exactly as I remembered it. A queen-sized bed sagged slightly in the center, its outdated floral comforter doing little to hide the wear. The lighting was dim, casting shadows on the faded wallpaper and scuffed baseboards. The bathroom featured cracked tiles and a clunky, outdated vanity. Worst of all, the window looked not toward the lake or mountains, but directly over the service drive where delivery trucks came and went. Above the bed, the ceiling bore a 2-foot water stain, yellowed and obvious. The maintenance team had fixed the leak, but cosmetic repair hadn't yet happened. A rickety dresser leaned to one side, and the HVAC unit under the window rattled loudly when I turned it on. By any measure, especially Prescott Hospitality Group's, this room wasn't just mediocre. It was unacceptable, and it had been chosen deliberately. Even our most basic lodge rooms would have been more than sufficient. Yet Brianna had arranged for me to stay in the one section that wasn't open to guests. Her message had been clear: this is what you deserve. I placed my weekend bag on the luggage stand and pulled out my phone. Found my accommodations. Cedar room, old wing. Leak still visible. Please confirm no other family placed in this section. Why? Gregory's reply came almost instantly. No other guests assigned to old wing, only used for staff access, storage. Maintenance confirmed ceiling structurally sound. Cosmetic fixes pending. Your suite prepped private elevator access with master key. I smirked, pocketed my guest key card, and slid the master access card into my purse. My executive suite top floor, private balcony, dual fireplace soaking tub was waiting. But not yet. For now, I would play the part and see how far this game went. After a quick shower in the cramped bathroom, I changed for dinner, catching my reflection in the mirror. It was a strange thing, knowing I owned everything, from the dinnerware to the floor beneath my feet, yet still being assigned the worst seat at the table. But tonight, I wasn't ready to correct them. Not yet. At exactly 7:00 p.m., I arrived at the Lakeview dining room, one of our most elegant private spaces. Sunlight shimmered over the water through tall glass windows. My family had already taken their seats, and just as expected, the hierarchy was written into the seating chart. Aunt Vivian and Uncle Charles sat at the heads of the table, flanked by Lucas, Rebecca, Brianna, and the rest of their favorites. My place card sat near the opposite end between my parents and across from a distant cousin I barely recognized. "Natalie, there you are," my mom said warmly. "How's your room?" Before I could speak, Brianna chimed in from mid-table. "It's one of their heritage rooms, Aunt Elaine. Very charming." I bit back a smile. Charming indeed. Very rustic and authentic to the original lodge, that's one way to describe it. I replied with a calm smile, setting down my napkin. Honestly, the water stain on the ceiling adds a certain historical ambiance. My father's brow furrowed immediately. Water stain, Natalie? That doesn't sound right. Should we talk to the front desk? They might have another room available. I patted his hand gently. It's okay, Dad. I'll manage for the weekend. From the head of the table, Aunt Vivian caught wind of our conversation and chimed in her voice, rising just enough to gather attention. "Oh, Natalie, these luxury resorts always have a few quirky rooms. That's why it's so important to book early and be specific about what you want, like we were." Uncle Charles raised his wine glass toward Brianna, smirking. "Or have someone who knows how to negotiate manage the arrangements." Brianna glowed under the praise. The reservations manager was very helpful once I explained who we were. She added with pride, "I made sure everyone was placed according to their needs and preferences." The unspoken message lingered in the air I had gotten the worst room because they thought it fit me best. I let the implication pass as our servers arrived with the first course. Dinner unfolded much like every Prescott gathering. Uncle Charles dominated the conversation, holding court as if we were gathered to hear the gospel of his latest car dealership acquisition. The others nodded, some impressed others just going through the motions. I noticed how he addressed the staff, not overtly rude, but clearly dismissive. Our sommelier became wine guy, and when Chef Michael arrived to describe the curated seasonal dishes, Uncle Charles waved him off. Yes, very interesting," he said, cutting off Michael's passionate explanation of our farm-to-table program. "Just make sure my steak's medium rare. Can't stand when people ruin good beef." Michael's eyes flashed with frustration before he masked it with a practiced nod. He had worked in Michelin-starred kitchens in Paris and Manhattan before I convinced him to come to Ridgeview Pines. His skill was the cornerstone of our dining experience. He was an artist, and watching him be treated like a line cook stung more than I expected. As the main course arrived, the topic predictably shifted to professional milestones. Rebecca beamed as she shared Lucas just made junior partner 6 months early. The firm couldn't overlook his work on the Westwell case. Not to be outdone, Brianna added, Nathan's practice is expanding again. They're building a new wing at the medical center just for his department. Nods and murmurs of approval followed. They didn't ask about me, of course. I remained a non-topic quiet. Irrelevant, invisible. But that was about to change. They just didn't know it yet. Because while they toasted new titles and parking spots, they were doing so in a dining room I built on chairs I ordered under lights I chose, and it wouldn't be long before the truth lit up the entire table. As expected, the spotlight eventually drifted to me. Between bites of filet and sips of Merlot, Aunt Vivian turned toward me with what almost sounded like genuine curiosity. "So Natalie, how's your hotel job going?" Still with that same chain, I actually moved on from that position. I said, keeping my tone even, "I'm with a different hospitality group now." My father, ever hopeful, leaned forward. "Did you get a promotion?" Before I could reply, Uncle Charles let out a dismissive chuckle. In this economy, hospitality's still trying to recover from the pandemic. Probably just a lateral move to stay afloat, right? "Nat, something like that?" I replied vaguely, resisting the urge to roll my eyes. I didn't want to lie, but I wasn't quite ready to hand them the full truth just yet. Brianna set down her water glass with a rehearsed smile. "Well, we're just glad you could afford to join us this year, Nat." These luxury resorts can be a stretch on a hotel manager's salary. The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. Then Uncle Charles turned to one of our servers, Sophia, one of my best team members, who was refilling water glasses. "Bet you see a lot of wealthy folks here, huh?" he said loudly. "I was just telling my niece about my dealerships, Prescott Automotive Group. You've heard of us, I'm sure. We supply vehicles to some very prominent people in the region." Sophia, graceful as always, smiled with subtle poise. "I can't say I have, sir. But Ridgeview Pines welcomes guests from all walks of life." I covered a smirk with my napkin. Sophia knew exactly who I was and exactly what we were doing. Her professionalism never faltered. Uncle Charles, slightly deflated, launched into an unsolicited monologue about his business empire to the servers who nodded politely while clearing plates. I caught Sophia's eye and gave her a quiet nod of thanks. After dinner, most of the family drifted toward the lakeside fire pit for drinks and late-night conversation. I excused myself briefly, ducking through the staff corridor and heading up to my actual suite. The executive suite occupied the entire west wing of the top floor. From the wraparound windows, I could see both the lake, glimmering under moonlight, and the snow-dusted peaks in the distance. My private terrace, complete with a hot tub and fire feature, waited untouched. I changed quickly into something warmer and took the service elevator back down, rejoining the group unnoticed. The next morning brought fresh evidence of the family pecking order. While heading to breakfast, I overheard my parents asking about a private boat tour, something I hadn't even known was planned. When the boat party returned, Brianna feigned surprise. "Oh no, did Natalie not get my message? I sent out a group text this morning." "Maybe your phone doesn't get great reception down in the old wing." She smiled sweetly. I didn't flinch. Let her keep playing her little games. I already had the winning hand. I checked my phone. No missed texts, no overlooked messages, nothing. Later that afternoon, I passed through the main lodge lobby, just in time to witness Aunt Vivian at the front desk complaining loudly about the temperature in her suite. Her voice, laced with entitlement, carried all the way across the room. When we pay this much for accommodations, we expect everything to be perfect. The irony wasn't lost on me. Vivian was paying a deeply discounted group rate generously arranged by Brianna, who had somehow negotiated prices well below even our lowest seasonal promotions, including for the resort's most premium rooms. Still, the staff responded promptly and professionally, offering adjustments and extra amenities without hesitation. They handled her as I had trained them to, with grace and courtesy, no matter the guest's behavior. But by the evening of day 2, I had witnessed enough. The final straw came when I discovered by accident that nearly the entire family had attended our exclusive wine pairing dinner in the Ridgeview Pines signature room, our fine dining experience that required weeks of advance booking and a hefty per-person fee. I saw them walking back toward the lodge as I sat quietly in the library nook, half holding a book I hadn't turned a page of in 20 minutes. They were flushed, content, and clearly satisfied. "Absolutely exquisite," Aunt Vivian declared, smiling as they passed through the lobby. "That venison with the local Pinot Noir. Inspired." My mother spotted me first. "Natalie." "There you are. We missed you at dinner." I closed my book. I didn't know there was a dinner. Was it a last-minute thing? A beat of silence. Uncle Charles cleared his throat. "Well, it was an exclusive event. Limited seating, you understand. Brianna got us in, those of us who really appreciate fine dining." Brianna, trying to sound kind, added, "It was $300 per person. We didn't want you to feel obligated. You'd mentioned catching up on emails anyway." Lucas jumped in. "Yeah, you said you had work stuff, remember? Except I hadn't. I said no such thing." The discomfort in my parents' eyes told me everything they'd been pressured to keep it from me. The sting wasn't about missing a meal. It was about being deliberately excluded from the very event I designed held in the restaurant I built, featuring the chef I recruited, serving the wine I personally selected. That night, as I lay on the sagging mattress in the cedar room, staring up at the still visible water stain, I reached my limit. The time for quiet observation had passed. Tomorrow, everything would change. At dawn, I slipped out of the room, grabbed my master key, and took the private elevator to the executive floor. My actual suite and the resort's management offices were silent in the early light. I entered my office, and Gregory was already waiting, 2 coffees in hand and concern in his eyes. "Everything all right, Miss Prescott?" "Your message sounded urgent." I nodded, setting down my phone. "It's time, Gregory. Let's show them exactly where they are." If you've ever waited for the perfect moment to reveal the truth to those who doubted, you don't miss what happens next. And make sure to subscribe so you're the first to see how it all unfolds. "It's time to drop the cover," Gregory, I said, accepting the coffee he handed me. The warmth of the cup grounded me as I looked out over the misty lake. I've seen enough of how they behave when they think no one's watching. For the next hour, we mapped out the details of what I wanted to be a measured reveal, not a spectacle, but something undeniable. This wasn't about revenge. It was about being seen, finally, as the woman I had worked so hard to become. "I want the staff briefed and ready by 10 a.m., I instructed, "and have the presidential suite fully staged for official occupancy. I'll be checking out of the Cedar Room with flair." Gregory, usually composed and professional, allowed himself a grin. "The team will be thrilled to finally acknowledge you openly, Ms. Prescott. It's been a challenge keeping the truth under wraps." "I can imagine. Please tell them how much I appreciate their discretion and loyalty. And Gregory, have maintenance document the Cedar Room before housekeeping touches it. I want a full report on my desk by this afternoon." With our plan finalized, I returned briefly to the Cedar Room, knowing it would be for the last time. I shed the casual attire I'd worn all weekend and stepped into one of my executive ensembles, a sharp charcoal suit, a soft silk blouse, and delicate yet unmistakably high-end jewelry. I styled my hair with intention-applied makeup like armor. I was no longer playing the role they'd assigned me. Today they would meet the real me, Natalie Prescott, owner and CEO of Prescott Hospitality Group. At precisely 9 a.m., I walked into the private breakfast dining room. Conversations faltered. Silverware paused mid-air. A few coffee cups hovered just short of lips. All eyes turned toward me, not with recognition of my status, yet but with startled curiosity. My mother blinked. "Natalie, are you headed somewhere?" "Just dressed for a meeting later," I said, smoothly sliding into my seat. One of the servers, James, freshly briefed, stepped forward with polished grace and poured my coffee. "Thank you, James," I said, meeting his eyes with a warm smile. "How's Lauren doing with her college applications?" James lit up. "Very well, Ms. Prescott. She's already been accepted to 3 universities. Thank you for asking." Across the table, Aunt Vivian's eyebrows twitched upward ever so slightly. She said nothing, but the shift in her expression was hard to miss. Throughout breakfast, the clues kept coming. Staff members greeted me by name. The chef came out personally, not just with updates on the menu, but to ask how I'd enjoyed the meal. My seating had subtly shifted closer to the center. Several relatives exchanged glances, sensing that something had changed, but unable to piece it together just yet. But they wouldn't have to wait long. By 9:45 a.m., the tension around the breakfast table had shifted. My relatives were no longer simply curious. They were clearly confused. Sideways glances and whispered exchanges passed between them as the staff continued to treat me with unmistakable deference. Uncle Charles finally broke the silence as he set down his coffee cup. "You seem quite familiar with the staff here, Natalie. Have you stayed at Ridgeview Pines before?" I smiled lightly, folding my napkin. "You could say I'm intimately familiar with this place." Before he could follow up, Gregory appeared beside me. Professional, as always. "Excuse me, Miss Prescott. Everything has been prepared just as you requested." "Thank you, Gregory," I said, rising from my chair. "Please let everyone know I'll be there momentarily." As he walked off, Brianna leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "Nat, why does the manager know your name and what's been prepared for you?" I stood straightening the jacket of my tailored suit. "If you'll all excuse me for a moment, I believe there's an announcement in the main lobby that may interest you." Their curiosity overtook their confusion, and most of them followed me out of the private dining room through the lakeside restaurant and into the grand stone lobby. Subtle signs of preparation were visible. Fresh floral arrangements, staff positioned discreetly yet strategically, all moving with a sense of anticipation. As we gathered near the massive fireplace, Gregory approached, flanked by several senior members of the executive team. "Ms. Prescott," he said formally. His voice clear in the grand acoustics of the vaulted ceiling, the management team is assembled for the morning briefing. A hush fell over the space. Even guests relaxing in nearby seating areas paused, watching with interest as what looked like a formal hotel gathering began. I turned to address the team, my posture calm but deliberate. "Thank you all for joining me. This morning, I began speaking to my staff while fully aware of the stunned faces just behind me. Before we begin our weekly leadership briefing, I'd like to take a moment to introduce myself properly to some of our guests." I turned slowly to face my family, locking eyes with them as I spoke. For those of you who don't know, my name is Natalie Prescott, CEO and owner of Prescott Hospitality Group, which acquired Ridgeview Pines Resort last year. This is our flagship property and one I'm deeply proud of. The silence that followed was profound. I watched the expression shift, shock, confusion, then the slow dawn of realization. My mother raised her hand to her mouth, eyes wide. My father blinked rapidly, then smiled, quiet pride written across his face. Aunt Vivian didn't move. She just stared, frozen. "You own this place?" Uncle Charles asked. Finally, his voice small. I nodded. "This one and 7 others across the region. But Ridgeview Pines is special. We've worked hard to preserve its legacy while elevating its service to the highest standards." I paused briefly. "Well, most of the standards. The old wing is still scheduled for renovation next quarter," I added lightly, folding my hands in front of me. Brianna's face had gone noticeably pale. "But you never said anything?" she stammered. "When I was assigning rooms." "No, I didn't," I replied calmly. "I was curious how my family would treat me when they believed I was just the same underachieving hotel employee they've always assumed me to be. Let's just say it's been incredibly educational." I turned to face my management team again. "Gregory, please have my belongings moved from the Cedar Room to the Presidential Suite immediately. I'll be officially checking in for the remainder of my stay." "Of course, Ms. Prescott," Gregory said, offering a slight bow. "Would you like anything else?" "Yes. Please ensure that all charges for my family's stay are correctly itemized. No more group rate averaging. Each family should receive a detailed bill reflecting their actual accommodations and activities." "Understood." As my team moved efficiently to carry out my requests, I turned back toward the stunned group of relatives. The expressions had shifted now. Not just shock, but a swirl of embarrassment, unease. And in a few faces, something harder to define, calculation. They were already adjusting. "Well," then I said with a genuine but pointed smile, "shall we continue with the reunion?" "Aunt Vivian, didn't you mention a hike to the waterfall this morning?" I gestured toward the expansive glass doors that led to the trail entrance. "It's actually one of my favorite spots on the property." As we walked out into the crisp Colorado air, the family dynamic had clearly tilted. People who'd barely acknowledged me during dinner now found urgent reasons to walk beside me. They asked thoughtful questions about the resort, complimented the interiors, commented on the service quality with newfound enthusiasm. My parents caught up to me quietly. My father's eyes shimmered with tears he didn't bother hiding. "Why didn't you tell us, sweetheart?" my mother asked softly. I looked at them, heartful. "I tried. In my way," I said, "but everyone had these fixed ideas about who I was, what I was capable of. After a while, it just felt easier to wait until I could show you." My father squeezed my hand tightly. "We are so proud of you. I just wish we'd known sooner. You supported me when it mattered," I said, smiling at both of them. That's more than I can say for some others. We stepped onto the trail, sunlight filtering through the trees, and for the first time all weekend, I felt completely unburdened. The secret I had carried quietly, stubbornly, was finally laid bare. No more hiding. No more dimming my light to make others comfortable. Whatever happened next, I would meet it as my true self. And in the hours that followed, what I saw from my family was nothing short of a character study, each reaction revealing who they truly were underneath the polite smiles. Aunt Vivian recovered from her initial shock with impressive speed. Midway through the waterfall hike, she approached me with a measured smile and carefully calibrated warmth. Natalie, darling, what an extraordinary surprise. You must know we've always believed in your potential. Have you? I asked calmly, matching her tone. That hasn't quite been my impression over the years. She gave a small, airy laugh and waved a manicured hand. Oh, family dynamics are so complicated, aren't they? I'm sure there have been misunderstandings. But truly, we've always wanted the best for you. The best, I said, my voice. Even being the cedar room with the leaking ceiling, Aunt Vivian's cheeks flushed ever so slightly. Well, Brianna handled the room assignments. I'm sure she had no idea about your connection to the resort. That much is obvious, I said with a faint smile. Though it does make one wonder why she thought that room was suitable for anyone, especially family. Before she could offer more backpedaling disguised as graciousness, I politely excused myself and joined a cousin who was admiring the mist rising off the waterfall. The rest of the day unfolded like a well-rehearsed play. One by one, family members approached me, trying to rewrite the past. Suddenly, everyone remembered encouraging my career, admiring my independence, or respecting my work ethic. Years of dismissal and condescension had apparently been figments of my imagination. Uncle Charles took a more direct approach. He caught me by the boathouse, his demeanor businesslike. Natalie, we should discuss potential synergies between our companies. I've been thinking Prescott Automotive could offer you a preferential fleet rate. Mutually beneficial, of course. I nodded. An interesting proposal. Feel free to send it to my business development team. They handle all vendor relationships. His smile faltered. Well, I thought perhaps we could talk it through, just the two of us. Keep it in the family. I found that maintaining professional boundaries is best. I replied, my voice polite but firm, especially when it comes to family. He nodded, slowly absorbing the new reality where he wasn't granted automatic access to my time or my business because of shared blood. Later that afternoon, as I was checking in with the front desk team, Brianna approached me. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and her usual confidence had given way to uncertainty. Nat, can we talk? Just for a moment, I led her to a quiet corner of the lobby. I was curious. Would she offer an apology? A justification, or something in between? She wrung her hands. I'm so embarrassed. About the cedar room. If I had known, I finished for her. If you'd known I owned the resort, you would have given me a better room. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. That's exactly the problem, Brianna. You shouldn't have put anyone in that room. It's not meant for guests, it doesn't meet our standards. And the fact that you thought it was acceptable for me says more than you realize. Her eyes welled again. And for once, I let the silence speak louder than either of us could. I just thought, Brianna began. Hesitantly, you never seemed interested in the fancy rooms during past reunions. You always said you were fine with whatever you got. Being agreeable, I replied gently. But firmly is not the same as deserving less. Her eyes dropped. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. What bothered me most, I continued, wasn't the cedar room. It was being deliberately excluded from family activities like the wine dinner, and being lied to about room availability when I've got access to the entire booking system. Brianna paled. We didn't think you'd be interested in paying that much. Or that maybe I'd feel more at home with the cleaning staff, I shot back. Because if that was your goal, it worked. They're the only ones who spoke to me with kindness this entire weekend. She blinked back tears. Can you forgive me? I never meant to hurt you. I studied her, letting the silence sit between us. Forgiveness might be possible, I said at last. But things will need to change. I'm not the same person you've spent years underestimating, and I won't be treated like that again by you or anyone in this family. That evening, I officially moved into the presidential suite, a 2,500-square-foot sanctuary that spanned the entire east wing of the resort's top floor. The suite featured a grand master bedroom with a handcrafted alderwood bed, a spacious living room centered around a stone fireplace, a private dining space that seated 8, a butler's pantry, a spa-style bathroom with a freestanding tub overlooking the Rockies, and a wraparound terrace complete with hot tub and panoramic mountain views. My parents were the first guests I invited. Their expressions were a mixture of wonder and pride as they stepped inside. "This is where you usually stay when you're here?" my mother asked, trailing her hand across the custom cherrywood table. "Yes," I nodded. "I have a private elevator key that brings me straight up. I've actually been coming up here every night after everyone went to bed, and heading back to the cedar room before breakfast." My father let out a low whistle, shaking his head. "All this time. You've been watching us from the shadows. That must have been tough." "At times," I admitted. "But mostly, I was curious. I wanted to see whether anything had changed, whether anyone would treat me differently without knowing who I really was." And instead, my mother murmured, "You got a leaking ceiling," and left out of the wine dinner, my father added, jaw tight. "Vivian pressured us not to mention it, said there weren't enough seats, that it would just make you feel bad." I nodded, unsurprised. "Well, I'm hosting my own dinner tonight, just for the two of you, if you're available." Their faces lit up. We wouldn't miss it. That invitation and their joy meant more than any of the day's revelations. Later that night, I arranged a private tour of Ridgeview Pines for any interested family members, personally leading them through spaces normally off-limits, our culinary test kitchen, executive wine cellar, and staff innovation lounge. They finally saw what I had built with no apologies and no more pretending. We toured the private wine cellar home to over 2,000 carefully curated bottles, then moved on to the organic garden, where fresh herbs and produce supplied our kitchens daily. Finally, I led them through the back-end operations, from staff quarters to the logistics hub that kept Ridgeview Pines running with quiet precision. I watched as their faces shifted from polite curiosity to something deeper. They weren't just impressed. They were beginning to understand. This wasn't a lucky break or a novelty business. This was the product of strategic planning, relentless work, and decisive leadership. During the tour, staff members approached with questions, scheduling changes, inventory updates, a minor plumbing issue in one of the annex rooms. I addressed each calmly and professionally, not missing a beat. By the time we returned to the main lodge, there was no longer any confusion. There was no question in anyone's mind who ran Ridgeview Pines. That evening, I hosted a private dinner for my parents in the presidential suite. Our executive chef, thrilled to cook personally for me without secrecy, created a custom 5-course meal using ingredients sourced from our own garden. We laughed over dessert, shared childhood memories, and most importantly, reconnected. The distance my secrecy had created slowly began to fade. As they prepared to leave, my father embraced me tightly. "Tomorrow's the last day of the reunion. What are you planning?" I smiled. "Just one final lesson, and a few consequences." The next morning, I called the front desk and gave instructions for individualized invoices. No more divide, everything evenly. That tradition had served only those who benefited from it the most. For my parents and the handful of relatives who had always treated me with kindness, I applied our friends and family discount, 50% off all accommodations and services. For the neutral parties, those who hadn't been especially cruel but hadn't extended much kindness either, I maintained the original group rate, but itemized charges based on actual usage. But for Aunt Vivian, Uncle Charles, Brianna, and Lucas, the ones who had dismissed, excluded, and undermined me, I issued special invoices. Each reflected the full rack rate of their premium suites, plus itemized charges for every luxury they had enjoyed. The wine dinner, private boat rental, spa packages, early check-ins, even additional room service. Brianna's family bill, originally expected to be around $1,400, now totaled close to $5,000, accurately reflecting their Mountain View suite, exclusive amenities, and full-priced add-ons. This wasn't revenge. It was an education delivered in the currency they understood best. On the final morning of the reunion, the lobby buzzed with activity as families checked out and gathered their bags. I positioned myself near the front desk, casually sipping coffee, observing quietly. One by one, they approached the counter, and one by one, they opened their final invoices and finally began to grasp the true cost of their assumptions. The reaction spoke volumes. My parents were the first to notice the generous discount on their invoice. My father, glanced at the total and opened his mouth to protest. But I caught his eye and gave a slight shake of my head. This was my gift to them, and he understood without another word. A few cousins and aunts who had treated me with genuine warmth throughout the years received similar invoices with their 50% friends and family rate noted clearly at the bottom. Their thanks were sincere, and I accepted each one with quiet gratitude. Then came the moment I had both dreaded and expected. Aunt Vivian strode to the front desk, envelope in hand, wearing a polished smile that quickly fell as the clerk began to explain the billing breakdown. "There must be some mistake," she said sharply, her voice rising. "We were quoted a group rate for the entire stay. The group rate was applied to your base lodging." The front desk clerk replied politely, following the script I had prepared. "However, premium accommodations and all additional services are billed at standard rates per the reservation terms." "This is outrageous," Vivian snapped. "I demand to speak to a manager." Immediately. Right on cue, Gregory appeared with his usual calm demeanor. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" "There certainly is. This bill is nearly triple what we were expecting. I want to speak to whoever is in charge of billing." I stepped forward. "That would be me. Is there an issue with your invoice?" "Aunt Vivian," her face flushed as she waved the paper in my direction. "Natalie, you know this isn't what we agreed to. Brianna arranged a package deal for everyone. She arranged discounted base accommodations," I corrected gently. "But she didn't have the authority to waive charges for premium rooms, wine dinners, or spa services. Those are billed according to standard policy." "But we're family," she said indignantly. "Yes, we are," I agreed, holding her gaze. "And families should treat each other with respect. That includes not excluding relatives from events or assigning them to substandard rooms while taking the best for themselves." Her eyes narrowed, realization setting in. "This is about the cedar room and the wine dinner. You're punishing us." I smiled softly. I prefer to call it a lesson in consequences. For years, I accepted being treated as less than by some members of this family. That ends now. The bill simply reflects the true value of your experience here. Nothing more, nothing less. Similar scenes unfolded as Uncle Charles, Brianna, and Lucas received their invoices. There were threats to dispute the charges, appeals to family loyalty, and even a few tearful accusations of vindictiveness. But I remained calm and firm. "You're not being charged for who you are. You're being charged for what you used. You can't be serious about enforcing these charges," Uncle Charles said through gritted teeth after pulling me aside near the valet stand. "It's practically highway robbery. It's the standard rate any guest would pay for the services you received," I replied calmly. "In fact, you're still receiving a modest discount as part of the reunion package." "But that's different," he argued. "Those are strangers' guests. We're family, and this is my business." "Uncle Charles," I said, keeping my voice steady, "the one I built from the ground up while being told I was unambitious and naive. The one I was managing while you all assumed I was still just an assistant somewhere." By checkout time, most of the family had settled their balances. Some with grace, others with tight-lipped reluctance. I stood in the arched entrance of Ridgeview Pines Resort, bidding farewell to cousins, aunts, and uncles as they filtered out, some offering warm embraces, others giving short, awkward nods. My parents were the last to leave, lingering on the wraparound porch with me to soak in the morning view. "Was it worth it?" my father asked, as we strolled quietly along the edge of the forest trail. "Keeping your success to yourself for all these years?" I exhaled slowly, considering the question. Part of me wishes I'd spoken up sooner, that I had demanded respect without needing the title or the suite to prove my worth. But watching how people treat you when they think you're powerless, that taught me more than any speech ever could. "And what now?" my mom asked softly, "with the family?" "Some bridges were burned," I admitted, "but maybe they needed to be. I'm not slamming any doors, but I'm not handing out keys either. If someone wants to be part of my life, they'll need to see me, not just what I can give them." That afternoon, once my parents left, I returned to the presidential suite and stepped out onto the stone terrace. The horizon stretched endlessly beyond the mountain ridges, the lake below mirroring the lavender and gold of the setting sun. Despite the emotional exhaustion, I felt light, like I'd finally stopped carrying someone else's expectations. In the days that followed, the messages trickled in. Some were heartfelt apologies from cousins who admitted they had underestimated me. Others were more transactional, hinting at future discounts or favors now that they knew who I was. A few lashed out, accusing me of being vindictive. I responded to each according to its truth. I wasn't interested in revenge, only in clarity. The most unexpected message came from Aunt Vivian. Her email was raw, even uncomfortable to read. "I've not been the aunt you deserved," she wrote. "I realize now I measured you by the wrong yardstick. You didn't change, Natalie. I just finally saw you." It wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was acknowledgement. And that's where healing begins. As for Brianna, our relationship would take longer to repair if it ever could be. Years of quiet dismissal and calculated exclusion had left scars that wouldn't fade easily. But her late-night call, tearful and free of excuses, at least acknowledged the damage she had done. The most meaningful part of the reunion wasn't being recognized for my success. It was the liberation that came from no longer hiding it. I had spent years shrinking myself to fit into a mold that kept others comfortable. That version of me no longer existed. In its place stood a new promise to myself to be unapologetically real in every room with every person. Not a filtered version designed to make others feel superior. My success didn't change who I was. It simply reminded me I deserved better. As I signed off on the final billing report, one thing was clear: whoever crossed into my world next would meet the full, undiminished Natalie Prescott. If you've ever been underestimated by the very people who should have supported you, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let me know. How did you find your voice again? Your words mean more than you know. My journey taught me this: never let anyone else define your worth, especially not those who benefit from you playing small. Stand tall, even if your hands shake. Be proud of what you've built, even if no one clapped. And most of all, protect your peace. You deserve rooms where your full self is welcome, no discounts, no exceptions.